Kevin Marsh's body was found sitting upright in the snow at 400 meters on Mount Everest. Not collapsed, not fallen. Sitting, his oxygen mask was off. His gloves were removed and placed neatly beside him. His jacket was unzipped. And according to his Sherpa Fu Dorje, Kevin's last words were 4 syllables that will haunt everyone who hears them. Finally at peace. He was 34 years old. He had a 6-year-old daughter named Lily. He had a return flight booked to San Francisco for June 3rd. He had a new apartment he'd never sleep in. And he had a camera in his chest pocket that recorded everything, including the 17 minutes between the moment he sat down and the moment he stopped breathing. That footage has never been released publicly. His family has seen it. His mother couldn't finish watching. His ex-wife refused to watch at all. But the expedition company's internal review board watched it 4 times. And what they saw on that footage, what Kevin said, what he did, how he behaved in those final 17 minutes, forced them to answer a question they'd been dodging since the day they accepted his money. Did they send a suicidal man up Everest? Here's what most people think happened. A heartbroken guy wanted to prove his ex-wife wrong. He climbed Everest out of spite. He ignored warnings. He died because his ego wrote a check his body couldn't cash. That's the version that went viral. That's the version climbing forums repeated for months. It's clean, it's simple, and it's almost entirely wrong. Kevin didn't ignore the Sherpa's warning. He heard every word Fu Dorje said. He agreed with most of it. The problem wasn't that Kevin dismissed the danger. The problem was that Kevin didn't care about the danger. There's a difference, a massive one. And that difference is exactly what 3 separate people tried to flag before Kevin ever left the United States. His therapist, Dr. Rachel Osman, wrote a letter, not to Kevin's mother, Sandra Marsh. The letter was dated February 12, 2019, 3 months before Kevin flew to Nepal. In it, Dr. Osman expressed concern that Kevin was exhibiting signs of what she called passive suicidal ideation, not active planning. Not explicit threats, but a consistent pattern of detachment from future outcomes. Kevin had stopped talking about what he'd do after Everest. He'd stopped mentioning his daughter in sessions. He'd started referring to the climb as the last thing I need to do. Dr. Osman couldn't legally stop Kevin from climbing. Patient confidentiality meant she couldn't call the expedition company. So she wrote to Sandra, hoping his mother could intervene. Sandra tried. We'll get to exactly what she said and what Kevin said back. But I want you to understand something first. This story is not about a man who died on Everest because he was reckless. This is about a man who chose Everest as the place where he would stop existing. And every single person around him, his Sherpa, his team leader, his therapist, his own mother, saw it happening. Some of them tried to stop it. None of them had enough power to actually do it. And the one entity that did have the power, the expedition company that took his $65,000, chose profit over intervention. If you think you've heard this story before, you haven't. Not like this. Not the full version. Because the full version includes details that the expedition company fought to keep private. Details about what Fu Dorje reported to base camp management on May 14th. Details about what Kevin wrote in a journal found in his tent after his death. Details about a phone call between Kevin and his ex-wife Hannah that happened 48 hours before his summit push. A call that lasted 11 minutes and ended with Kevin saying something that should have stopped the entire expedition in its tracks. Nobody stopped it. And now Kevin Marsh is a frozen landmark at 400 meters on the southeast ridge, sitting in the exact position he chose to die in. But this isn't just Kevin's story. 4 other people's lives were permanently altered by what happened on that mountain in May 2019. And if you're going to understand why Kevin died, really understand it, you need to know all of them. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like something you're going through is too heavy to carry, I need you to hear this right now. There are people who want to help. The number for the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is on screen. Call or text 988. You matter more than any mountain. Now, let me tell you about the 5 people at the center of this story. Because Kevin wasn't alone on that ridge, and the decisions that put him there didn't start at base camp. They started 18 months earlier, in a divorce lawyer's office in Palo Alto, California, when a woman named Hannah Marsh said 9 words that detonated her ex-husband's entire sense of self. Kevin heard those 9 words on October 3, 2017. He replayed them every single day for 18 months. He built an entire Everest expedition around them. He sold his apartment because of them. He drained his savings because of them. He trained 6 days a week for a year and a half because of them. And on May 16, 2019, at 400 meters above sea level, he finally answered them. Those 9 words were simple, almost casual. Hannah probably forgot she said them within a week, but Kevin carved them into his identity like a scar. "You will never accomplish anything meaningful in your life." She said it during their final mediation session. Kevin's lawyer confirmed it. Hannah's lawyer confirmed it. The mediator noted it in her session summary. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't part of an argument. It was delivered calmly, almost offhandedly, while discussing custody arrangements for Lily. Kevin had been late to 3 consecutive pickup times. Hannah was frustrated, and she said it. 9 words. 18 months of obsessive preparation. $65,000. 1 death. But here's the part that makes this story more complicated than a simple cause and effect tragedy. Kevin didn't decide to climb Everest that day. He didn't decide to climb Everest that month. The Everest idea came later, March 2018, 5 months after the mediation. What happened in those 5 months matters enormously. Because Kevin didn't go from humiliated ex-husband to Everest climber in a straight line. He went through something much darker first. Something his mother knew about. Something his therapist documented. Something the expedition company never asked about. And that's what makes this whole disaster so preventable. Not the climbing decisions. Not the weather. Not the Sherpa warnings. The most preventable part of Kevin Marsh's death happened before he ever bought a plane ticket. Pu Dorje knew. He figured it out within 3 days of meeting Kevin at base camp. A veteran Sherpa with 11 Everest summits, Pu Dorje had guided more than 60 clients to the top of the world. He'd seen altitude sickness. He'd seen panic. He'd seen arrogance. He'd seen fear. But he told investigators he'd never seen what he saw in Kevin's eyes. He wasn't scared of the mountain, Pu Dorje said in his formal statement. He wasn't excited either. Most clients are one or the other. Kevin was neither. He looked like a man who had already finished something, like he was just waiting. Pu Dorje reported his concerns to the expedition's base camp manager, a British logistics coordinator named Stuart Finch, on May 8, 2019, 8 days before Kevin died. The report was verbal. Pu Dorje told Finch that Kevin was refusing meals, crying alone in his tent at night, and had twice made comments about not needing to come back down. Stuart Finch's response to that report is one of the most contested facts in this entire case. Finch says he escalated it. The expedition company says he didn't. Pu Dorje says Finch told him to, quote, "keep an eye on it." The expedition company's internal emails, obtained during the family's lawsuit, suggest Finch sent a message to company headquarters in Kathmandu, but the content of that message was never disclosed. The company claimed attorney-client privilege. The family's lawyers called it a cover-up. What we know for certain is this. After Pu Dorje's report, nobody pulled Kevin off the mountain. Nobody required a psychological evaluation. Nobody called his emergency contact. Nobody did anything that would have cost the company a $65,000 refund. Kevin continued his acclimatization rotations. He climbed to Camp 2 and back. He climbed to Camp 3 and back. He performed physically within normal parameters. His blood oxygen levels were acceptable. His resting heart rate was stable. On paper, Kevin Marsh was a healthy, capable client progressing through a standard Everest expedition. On paper, he was fine. In his tent, alone, at night he was writing journal entries that would later make investigators sick. If this story is already changing what you thought you knew about climbing tragedies and the mental health crisis hiding inside adventure tourism, do me a favor, hit subscribe. Not because I'm asking, because the next story we're covering is even darker than this one, and you don't want to miss it. Kevin's journal was recovered from his tent at base camp after his death. It contained 41 entries spanning April 9th through May 14th. The family authorized limited excerpts for the investigation. Those excerpts revealed a man who was not climbing toward a summit. He was climbing away from a life he had already decided to leave. Entry dated April 22nd. Lily won't remember me either way. Better she remembers a father who reached the top of the world than a father who couldn't show up on time. Entry dated May 1st. Called Mom. She cried again. I almost told her, but telling her would mean she'd stop me, and I don't want to be stopped. Entry dated May 11th. Fu Dorje watches me like he knows. Maybe he does. Doesn't matter. We summit in 5 days. That last entry was written 5 days before Kevin sat down in the snow and took off his gloves. 5 days before he told Fu Dorje he was finally at peace. 5 days before a 34-year-old software developer from Palo Alto became a permanent fixture on the highest mountain on Earth. But between May 11th and May 16th, 4 things happened that could have changed everything. 4 chances to save Kevin Marsh's life. 4 moments when the right decision by the right person would have brought him home to his daughter. Every single one of those chances was missed. And to understand how that's possible, how 4 separate people could see a man walking toward his own death and fail to stop him, you need to know who Kevin Marsh was before Hannah's 9 words broke him. You need to know the version of Kevin that existed before October 2017. The version that laughed. The version that coached Lily's t-ball team. The version that his college roommate described as the most aggressively optimistic person I've ever met. Because that version of Kevin didn't die on Everest. That version died in a mediator's office 18 months earlier. The man who climbed the mountain was someone else entirely. And the people who loved the original Kevin spent the rest of their lives wondering when exactly they lost him, and whether the mountain was just where his body finally caught up with what had already happened to his soul. Chapter 2. The man before the mountain, Kevin Andrew Marsh, was born on September 14, 1984, in Walnut Creek, California. He was the only child of Sandra Marsh, a public school teacher, and Douglas Marsh, an electrician who left the family when Kevin was 7. Kevin never spoke to his father again. Douglas moved to Nevada, remarried, and died of a heart attack in 2011. Kevin didn't attend the funeral. That detail matters. Not because it explains everything, but because it establishes a pattern that would define Kevin's entire adult life. When someone rejected him, Kevin didn't fight, he didn't argue, he erased them. Completely. His father left, and Kevin acted as if his father had never existed. His college girlfriend broke up with him junior year, and Kevin deleted every photo, blocked every contact, and told his roommate that she was just someone I used to know. His best friend from high school, Tyler Reeves, had a falling out with Kevin over a borrowed car in 2009. Kevin never spoke to Tyler again. Not a word. For 10 years. His mother Sandra described this pattern to Dr. Osmond during a family session in late 2018. Kevin doesn't get angry, Sandra said. He disappears. He removes the thing that hurt him, and then he removes himself from whatever world that thing existed in. He's been doing it since he was 7 years old. Dr. Osmond wrote in her notes, patient exhibits avoidant coping mechanism triggered by perceived abandonment. Pattern is consistent and escalating. Each instance of perceived rejection results in more extreme withdrawal. Kevin graduated from UC Davis in 2006 with a degree in computer science. He was good at it. Really good. He landed a job at a mid-sized tech firm in San Francisco within 2 months of graduation. By 2010, he was a senior developer. By 2013, he was leading a team of 12. His annual salary reached $140,000. He bought a condo in Palo Alto. He drove a Subaru Outback. He ran half marathons on weekends. He met Hannah Clark at a friend's barbecue in July 2011. She was 26. He was 26. She was a marketing manager at a biotech startup. They bonded over a shared hatred of small talk and a shared love of terrible action movies. Their first date was a Steven Seagal double feature at a Revival cinema in the Mission District. Kevin told his mother after the first date that he was going to marry Hannah. Sandra laughed. Kevin wasn't joking. They married on April 18, 2013, in a small ceremony at Muir Woods. 42 guests. Kevin's vows made everyone cry. He said Hannah was the first person who ever made him feel like staying was better than leaving. That line landed differently after his death. For 4 years, the marriage was good. Not perfect. Kevin worked long hours. Hannah traveled for her job. They argued about dishes and money, and whose turn it was to pick up dry cleaning. Normal things, small things. The kind of friction that functional couples navigate without thinking about it. Lily was born on March 8, 2013. Kevin was in the delivery room. He cut the cord. The first photo of Kevin holding Lily shows a man so overwhelmed with joy that he looks almost confused by it, like he couldn't believe something this good was allowed to happen to him. Sandra later said the photo was the last time she saw her son truly happy. Things started to fracture in 2016. Not dramatically. Slowly. Kevin's company went through layoffs. He survived them, but his team was cut from 12 to 5. His workload tripled. He started coming home at 9 p.m., then 10, then 11. Hannah asked him to set boundaries with his boss. Kevin said he couldn't risk being the next one laid off. Hannah said he was choosing work over his family. Kevin heard, "You're failing us." That interpretation, Kevin hearing criticism as rejection, is crucial. Dr. Osmond later identified it as the core distortion in Kevin's thinking. Kevin didn't process disagreement as disagreement. He processed it as abandonment. Every time Hannah expressed frustration, Kevin heard his father walking out the door. Every time Hannah said, "You need to be here more," Kevin heard, "You're not enough." By early 2017, they were sleeping in separate rooms. Kevin told his mother it was because of his snoring. Sandra didn't believe him. Hannah told her own mother that Kevin had become a ghost in his own house. Present, but unreachable. Physically there, emotionally sealed off. He'd come home, eat dinner in silence, check on Lily, and disappear into his office until midnight. The divorce filing came on August 15, 2017. Hannah filed. Kevin didn't contest it. He didn't fight for the marriage. He didn't suggest counseling. He signed the papers his lawyer put in front of him and moved into a studio apartment in Mountain View. He saw Lily every other weekend, per the custody agreement. But here's where things went wrong. Not on the mountain. In the custody arrangement, Kevin started missing pickups. Not on purpose. He'd lose track of time. He'd forget which weekend was his. He'd show up an hour late, then 2 hours late. Hannah's frustration grew. Kevin's withdrawal deepened. Each missed pickup confirmed Hannah's belief that Kevin was unreliable. Each expression of Hannah's frustration confirmed Kevin's belief that he was being rejected. If you've ever watched someone spiral and felt helpless to stop it, you understand what Sandra was going through. She called Kevin every day. He answered maybe twice a week. She drove to his apartment unannounced. He was polite, distant, and clearly not eating well. She begged him to see someone. He finally agreed in early 2018. That's when he started seeing Dr. Osmond. But I need to go back to October 3, 2017. The mediation session. Because what happened in that room didn't just end a marriage. It ended Kevin Marsh. The mediation was supposed to finalize custody logistics. Drop-off times. Holiday schedules. Who gets Lily for Thanksgiving? Routine stuff. Kevin arrived 12 minutes late. He'd been late to the previous 3 sessions. Hannah was already seated when he walked in. The mediator, Carol Sung, noted in her report that Hannah appeared, visibly frustrated, and Kevin appeared withdrawn and fatigued. They worked through the schedule without major disagreement. Kevin agreed to almost everything Hannah proposed. He didn't negotiate. He didn't push back. He said fine, and okay, and whatever works for you. Carol Sung noted that Kevin's passivity concerned her. She wrote, "Father appeared disengaged from proceedings. Showed minimal investment in outcome." It was near the end of the session, during a discussion about Kevin's pattern of late pickups, that Hannah said it. Carol Sung's notes record the exchange. Hannah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. He can't even show up on time for his own daughter. Kevin, no response. Hannah, you will never accomplish anything meaningful in your life. Carol Sung noted that Kevin's expression did not change. He did not respond. He did not react visibly. The session ended 7 minutes later. Kevin shook hands with both lawyers, thanked the mediator, and left. He drove home. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 45 minutes. Then he went inside, opened his laptop, and searched highest mountains in the world. He stayed on that laptop until 4 a.m. Now, I need to be clear about something. Hannah Marsh is not the villain of this story. She said something cruel in a moment of frustration during one of the most stressful processes a person can go through. Millions of people say things they regret during divorce proceedings. Hannah had no way of knowing what those 9 words would trigger. She had no way of knowing that Kevin would build an entire death march around them. She has spoken publicly about this exactly once. A written statement through her lawyer in 2020, and in it, she said, "I have to live with what I said for the rest of my life. I was angry, I was exhausted, I was wrong, and I will never forgive myself." That statement cost Hannah something. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. She gave one anyway, and then she went silent. She has not spoken publicly since. She has asked, through her lawyer, that media respect her privacy and Lily's privacy. We will respect that here. Now, between October 2017 and March 2018, Kevin entered what Dr. Osman later described as the darkest period of his adult life. He stopped running. He stopped socializing. He showed up to work, performed adequately, and went home. His apartment was clean but empty. He'd sold or donated most of his possessions after the divorce. He kept a bed, a desk, a laptop, and a framed photo of Lily. One photo, in an entire apartment. His co-worker, a developer named Priya Nambiar, noticed the change. She told investigators that Kevin went from being the guy who organized team lunches to being invisible. He'd come in, do his work, leave. He didn't eat in the break room anymore. He didn't joke around. It was like someone had turned off a light inside him. Kevin started therapy with Dr. Osman in January 2018. Sessions were weekly. Dr. Osman's notes, again, limited excerpts authorized by the family, show a patient who was cooperative but emotionally flat. He answered questions. He completed exercises. He did the homework. But Dr. Osman noted a consistent pattern. Kevin spoke about the past and the present, never the future. When I asked Kevin what he wanted his life to look like in 5 years, Dr. Osman wrote, he paused for nearly 30 seconds and then said, "I don't think about that." When I pressed, he said, "There's no point planning for something that doesn't feel real." In March 2018, Kevin mentioned Everest for the first time. He told Dr. Osman he'd been researching high-altitude mountaineering. He said he wanted to do something that mattered. Dr. Osman asked what would make it matter. Kevin said, "Getting to the top." Dr. Osman asked what would happen after. Kevin didn't answer. That non-answer is the moment Dr. Osman's concern shifted from depression to something more dangerous. A person who plans an enormous undertaking but cannot articulate what comes after is not planning a challenge. They're planning an ending. And yet Kevin's Everest plan had a surface logic that was hard to argue with. He was physically capable. He had the financial resources. He had no medical conditions that would disqualify him. From the outside, a divorced man taking on a bucket list adventure looked like healthy recovery. It looked like growth. It looked like exactly the kind of bold, meaningful action that a therapist might even encourage. But Dr. Osman wasn't fooled. And what she did next, the letter to Sandra, the attempt to intervene without violating patient confidentiality, was ethically sound, professionally appropriate, and ultimately useless. Because by the time Sandra received that letter, Kevin had already made his decision. He'd already contacted the expedition company. He'd already wired the deposit. Sandra called Kevin the day she received Dr. Osman's letter, February 13, 2019. The conversation lasted 37 minutes. Sandra later recounted it to investigators in exhaustive detail. She remembered every word, every pause, every moment she wanted to scream but kept her voice steady. "Kevin, your therapist is worried about you," Sandra said. "She's worried enough to write to me. That's not normal." Kevin's response, "Mom, I'm fine. I'm better than I've been in months. I have a goal. I have something to work toward. This is a good thing." Sandra, "Honey, you sold your apartment. You spent your savings. You don't talk about coming back. Do you hear how that sounds?" Silence. 15 seconds. "Kevin, I'll call you from base camp. You'll see. When I summit, everything changes." Sandra asked the question every mother in her position would ask. "Changes how, Kevin? What changes?" Kevin said, "Everything." He didn't elaborate. Sandra didn't push harder. She told investigators she was afraid that if she pushed too hard, Kevin would cut her off entirely, like he did with his father, like he did with Tyler, like he did with everyone who got too close to a truth he didn't want examined. Kevin flew to Nepal on April 5, 2019. Sandra drove him to the airport. She hugged him at the curb. She told him she loved him. She told him to come home safe. Kevin hugged her back and said, "I love you too, Mom." Then he picked up his duffel bag, walked through the terminal doors, and Sandra never saw her son alive again. Fu Dorje was assigned to Kevin on April 12, 2019. And within 72 hours, the most experienced Sherpa on the expedition would see exactly what Dr. Osman saw. Exactly what Sandra saw. Exactly what everyone saw. The question that would haunt all of them was identical. If everyone could see it, why couldn't anyone stop it? Chapter 3. Base Camp Breakdown. Kevin arrived at Everest Base Camp on April 14, 2019. He trekked from Lukla with 11 other clients, 2 Western guides, and a support team of 14 Sherpas. The trek took 10 days. Most clients used that time to bond. They shared meals, traded stories, compared gear. By the time they reached base camp, they were a team. Kevin was not part of that team. He walked with the group but existed outside it. He ate meals at the edge of the dining tent. He answered questions with one-word responses. He smiled when someone made a joke, but the smile never reached his eyes. 2 clients later described him as polite but hollow. Another said talking to Kevin felt like knocking on a door that nobody was behind. Fu Dorje noticed Kevin during the trek. Not because of anything dramatic, because of something small. On day 4, near Namche Bazaar, the group stopped at a tea house. Everyone ordered food. Kevin sat at a table, looked at the menu, and then put it down. He didn't order. He didn't eat. When Fu Dorje asked if he was feeling okay, Kevin said, "I'm not hungry." Fu Dorje noted that Kevin had also skipped breakfast that morning. Skipping one meal at altitude isn't unusual. Appetite suppression is normal above 3,500 meters. But Kevin was skipping meals at 3,440 meters before altitude could explain it. And he would continue skipping meals for the next 32 days. The expedition was run by Summit Horizon Expeditions, a mid-tier commercial operator based in Kathmandu. They weren't the cheapest option, and they weren't the most expensive. Kevin had paid $65,000 for their full-service Everest package. Permits, base camp logistics, Sherpa support, oxygen, camp stocked through Camp 4, and satellite phone access. Summit Horizon had been operating on Everest for 9 years. They had a decent safety record. They'd put over 100 clients on the summit. They'd lost 2 clients in 9 years, both to altitude-related illness above the South Kernel industry average. The company's base camp manager was Stuart Finch, 41 years old. British, former military logistics officer turned adventure tourism coordinator. Finch had managed Everest base camp operations for Summit Horizon for 4 seasons. His job was everything below Camp 1: schedules, communications, weather reports, client welfare, supply chains, helicopter coordination. He was good at his job. He was organized, experienced, and calm under pressure. What Stuart Finch was not trained in, what no base camp manager in the commercial Everest industry was trained in, was psychological assessment. Finch could spot altitude sickness at 50 meters. He could read a weather forecast better than most meteorologists. He could coordinate a helicopter evacuation in 40 minutes. But he had zero training in identifying a client who had come to Everest to die. This is where the systemic failure begins. And if you think this is just about Kevin, you're wrong. This is about every commercial expedition that accepts a client's money without asking a single question about their mental state. Not one question. Kevin's application to Summit Horizon required a physician's physical clearance, a fitness assessment, and proof of previous high-altitude experience. Kevin had climbed Mount Rainier in Aconcagua. He passed every physical benchmark. His doctor signed off. His fitness assessment was above average. Nobody asked Kevin why he wanted to climb Everest. Nobody asked what he planned to do afterward. Nobody asked about his recent divorce, his financial situation, his emotional state, or his mental health history. The application had no psychological screening component. Zero. Not a single question. And this wasn't unique to Summit Horizon. In 2019, none of the major commercial Everest operators required psychological screening. Not one. You could be in the deepest clinical depression of your life, and as long as your heart rate and VO2 max checked out, you could wire $65,000 and get a spot on the mountain. Kevin began acclimatization rotations on April 20th. The standard protocol: climb to Camp 1, sleep, descend. Climb to Camp 2, sleep, descend. Climb to Camp 3, touch it, descend. Each rotation pushes the body higher, forcing it to produce more red blood cells. Adapt to lower oxygen. It's methodical. It's boring. It's essential. Kevin performed the rotations flawlessly. His physical metrics were consistently in the top third of the group. His blood oxygen at Camp 2 was 91%. Excellent. His resting heart rate at base camp was 62 beats per minute. His climbing speed was average. He followed Fudorje's instructions without complaint. He clipped into fixed lines properly. He managed his oxygen correctly. He did everything right. Everything physical. On April 25th, during the first rest day back at base camp after the Camp 2 rotation, Fudorje walked past Kevin's tent at 11 p.m. He heard crying. Not quiet sniffling. Sobbing. Deep, body-shaking sobs that Fudorje could hear through the tent fabric from 3 meters away. Fudorje stopped. He considered entering. He decided against it. Cultural norms, professional boundaries, and 11 years of Sherpa guiding experience told him that entering a crying client's tent uninvited at 11 p.m. was wrong. So he waited. The crying lasted approximately 20 minutes. Then, silence. The next morning, Kevin appeared at breakfast. His eyes were swollen. He ate half a piece of toast. Nobody commented on his appearance. The Western guides didn't notice, or didn't acknowledge. The other clients were absorbed in their own acclimatization anxieties. Fudorje noticed. He made a mental note, and he started watching Kevin more carefully. Over the next 2 weeks, Fudorje observed the following. Kevin cried in his tent on at least 6 separate nights. Kevin ate an estimated 800 to 1,000 calories per day, roughly half what a climber at base camp altitude requires. Kevin lost visible weight. Kevin did not participate in group activities. Kevin made one satellite phone call to his mother on May 2nd, a call that lasted 4 minutes and ended with Kevin saying, "I have to go, Mom. I'll call after summit." Kevin received no other calls. Kevin sent no messages. And Kevin made 2 comments that Fudorje found deeply disturbing. The first was on May 5th, during a gear check. Fudorje was reviewing Kevin's summit kit. Oxygen bottles, regulator, down suit, goggles, standard pre-climb protocol. Kevin cooperated mechanically. When Fudorje finished, he said what he said to every client: "This gear will get you up and bring you back safe." Kevin said, "Getting up is the only part that matters." Fudorje paused. He asked Kevin what he meant. Kevin smiled and said, "Just focused on the summit, that's all." Fudorje accepted the answer. But he didn't believe it. The second comment was on May 7th. Kevin and Fudorje were sitting outside Kevin's tent, watching clouds over the Khumbu icefall. Small talk. Fudorje asked Kevin if his daughter was excited for him to come home. Kevin's face changed. Not anger, not sadness, something emptier than either. "She won't know the difference," Kevin said. Fudorje: "What do you mean?" Kevin: "I mean she's 6. She won't remember any of this. She won't remember me being gone. She won't remember me coming back. None of it registers at that age." Fudorje knew this wasn't true. 6-year-olds absolutely remember a parent's absence. But he also knew that arguing with a client about their child wasn't his role. He filed the comment. He added it to his growing list. On May 8th, Fudorje went to Stuart Finch's operations tent. This is the meeting that would later become the most examined 4 minutes in Summit Horizon's history. Fudorje told Finch 3 things. 1. Kevin was not eating adequately. 2. Kevin was crying at night and showing signs of emotional instability. 3. Kevin had made comments suggesting he was not motivated by returning home safely. Finch's account of this meeting, given during the family's lawsuit deposition, was as follows. Foudorje expressed concern about the client's emotional state. I noted his observations. I told Foudorje I would speak with the client directly and assess the situation. I also told Foudorje to continue monitoring. Foudorje's account was different. I told Stewart that Kevin should not go higher. I said this man is not safe. Stewart told me that Kevin's physical numbers were good and that he would talk to Kevin. He said I should keep watching. He said sometimes clients get emotional at altitude. He did not say he would stop Kevin from climbing. 2 versions. 1 meeting. And no written record, because Stewart Finch did not document the conversation. There was no form for it. No protocol for recording a Sherpa's psychological concern about a client. No checkbox. No procedure. Stewart Finch did speak to Kevin. On May 9th, the following day. Finch's account of that conversation, again from his deposition, I asked Kevin how he was feeling. He said he was feeling good. I asked if he was eating enough. He said he'd been a little off but was fine. I asked if he had any concerns. He said no. I assessed him as fit to continue. 4 questions. That was the intervention. 4 surface-level questions that any functioning adult could deflect in 30 seconds. And Kevin, who had spent his entire life hiding his pain behind a mask of normalcy, deflected them effortlessly. Kevin's journal entry that night, May 9th. The base camp manager talked to me today, asked if I was okay. I told him what he needed to hear. He seemed relieved. They just want to check a box. Nobody actually wants to know. If that entry doesn't chill you, read it again. Kevin understood exactly what was happening. He understood that the people around him were performing concern, not exercising it. He understood that the system was designed to identify physical risk, not psychological risk, and he understood that as long as he said the right words, nobody would stop him. Subscribe if you want to see the rest of this investigation unfold. We release deep dive climbing disaster content every week, and what's coming next in this story will make you question everything about how commercial expeditions handle client safety. Between May 9th and May 14th, Kevin continued his acclimatization on schedule. Camp 3 rotation. Successful. Physical metrics normal. He returned to base camp on May 11th, the day he wrote the journal entry about Foudorje watching him, like he knows. On May 12th, something happened that almost changed everything. Sandra Marsh called the Summit Horizon satellite phone. She asked to speak with her son. The call was patched through to Kevin's personal satellite phone. The call lasted 9 minutes. Sandra later told investigators what she said. Kevin, I need you to come home. I've been talking to Dr. Osman. We both think you're not in a good place. Please. Lily needs you. I need you. Come home. Kevin's response, per Sandra, Mom, I'm 2 weeks from the summit. I've spent everything I have to get here. Everything. If I come home now, what was it for? What was any of it for? Sandra, it was for you. It was to prove something to yourself. You've done that. You made it to base camp. You climbed higher than 99% of people ever will. That's enough. Come home. Kevin, it's not enough. Sandra, why not? Kevin, because she said I'd never accomplish anything meaningful. Sandra, Kevin, Hannah said that in anger. She didn't mean, Kevin, she meant it. And she was right. She's been right about everything. I couldn't keep a marriage. I can't keep custody time straight. I can't even make my daughter's life better by being in it. This is the one thing I can do. Let me do it. Sandra was crying. Kevin's voice, she said, was calm. Terrifyingly calm. The voice of a man who had already decided. Kevin, please. I love you, Mom. I'll call you from the summit. He hung up. Sandra immediately called Summit Horizon's Kathmandu office. She told the receptionist her son was in danger. She asked them to pull him off the mountain. The receptionist took a message and said someone would call her back. Nobody called her back. On May 14th, Stewart Finch received the weather forecast for the summit window. May 16th looked optimal. Low winds, clear skies, manageable temperatures. Summit Horizon's lead Western guide, a New Zealander named Craig Hollister, approved the push. 12 clients would go. Kevin Marsh was among them. That same day, May 14th, Kevin made his last satellite phone call. Not to his mother. To Hannah. The call lasted 11 minutes. What was said in those 11 minutes would not become known until the lawsuit deposition in 2020. Hannah provided a partial account under oath. She said Kevin called to tell her he was about to summit. She said he sounded flat. She said he asked about Lily. She said he asked Hannah if she remembered what she said during mediation. Hannah said she told him she was sorry. She said she told him she didn't mean it. She said Kevin was quiet for a long time. Then Kevin said something that should have triggered an immediate emergency protocol from anyone who heard it. It doesn't matter anymore. None of it matters after tomorrow. Hannah asked him what he meant. Kevin said, I just mean I'll have done it. It'll be over. Hannah accepted the answer. She said goodbye. She told him to be safe. Kevin wrote his final journal entry that night. May 14th. 2 days before his death. Summit in 2 days. This is what I came for. After this, it's done. All of it. Everything. I don't need to explain it to anyone. They'll understand when it's over. Or they won't. It doesn't matter. May 15th was rest and preparation. Final gear checks, oxygen testing, route briefing. Kevin ate a full meal for the first time in weeks. Fou d'Orge noted it with surprise and cautious optimism. Kevin participated in the team briefing. He asked 2 technical questions about the Hillary step. He checked his camera battery. Fou d'Orge later said that May 15th was the day he almost believed Kevin was okay. He seemed different, more present, more focused. I thought maybe I was wrong about him. Maybe the summit goal was actually helping. Fou d'Orge wasn't wrong about Kevin. He was seeing the calm that comes after a decision has been made. The agitation was gone because the uncertainty was gone. Kevin knew exactly what was going to happen on the mountain. And that knowledge gave him a serenity that looked, from the outside, like determination. They departed base camp for the summit push at 4 a.m. on May 15th, headed for Camp 2. Kevin was roped with Fou d'Orge. He climbed steadily. He said very little. He filmed intermittently with his chest-mounted camera. The next 36 hours would end Kevin Marsh's life. And the footage from his camera would eventually prove that what happened at 400 meters was not an accident, not a breakdown, and not a surprise. It was exactly what Kevin came to do. Chapter 4, The Summit Push. The group reached Camp 2 at 1:30 p.m. on May 15th. 12 clients, 6 Sherpas, 2 Western guides. They melted snow for water, ate prepackaged meals, and tried to sleep. Nobody sleeps well at 400 meters. The body fights rest when oxygen is scarce. Most climbers manage 2 or 3 hours of shallow, gasping half-sleep before giving up and staring at the tent ceiling until the alarm. Kevin didn't try to sleep. Fou d'Orge was in the same tent. Standard practice, client and Sherpa paired together. Fou d'Orge said Kevin lay in his sleeping bag with his eyes open for 3 hours. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't fidget. He just lay there, breathing, staring at the tent fabric 6 inches from his face. At 11 p.m., the group departed Camp 2 for Camp 3. Night climbing. Headlamps in a line. The route through the Lot's face was fixed with ropes. Clip in, climb, unclip, move to next section, clip in. Repetitive. Mechanical. The kind of climbing that leaves your mind free to wander, which, for most climbers, means fighting back waves of doubt and fear. Kevin climbed efficiently. His pace was consistent. He clipped and unclipped without hesitation. Fou d'Orge stayed within arm's reach. Kevin didn't speak for the entire ascent. They reached Camp 3 at 100 meters by 3:45 a.m. on May 16th. 2 hours of rest. Hot drinks. Oxygen flow increased. Then the push to Camp 4, the South Canyon, at 920 meters. Camp 4 is where Everest stops pretending. Below the South Col, you can convince yourself this is hard hiking. Above it, you're in the death zone. Every breath provides roughly 1/3 the oxygen your body needs. Your brain starts making mistakes. Your body starts consuming itself for fuel. The clock is running. Every minute above 920 meters is a minute closer to a death your body can't prevent without descent. The group reached Camp 4 at 11:30 a.m. on May 16th. The plan was to rest until 9 p.m., then begin the final summit push through the night, aiming for a sunrise summit on May 17th. Standard protocol. Climb through the coldest, calmest hours. Summit at dawn. Descend before afternoon winds. Kevin ate half a energy bar at Camp 4. Fu Dorje offered him soup. Kevin declined. Fu Dorje offered him tea. Kevin took 3 sips and set the cup down. Kevin, you need calories, Fu Dorje said. The summit push is 12 hours. Your body needs fuel. Kevin looked at Fu Dorje. According to Fu Dorje's statement, Kevin's expression was unlike anything he'd seen in 11 years of guiding. Not fear. Not determination. Not exhaustion. Fu Dorje described it as acceptance. I have enough, Kevin said. At 9:15 p.m., 12 headlamps left Camp 4 and began moving up the southeast ridge. Temperature was minus 31 degrees Celsius. Wind was 15 knots, within acceptable limits. The sky was clear. Stars everywhere. The kind of night that summit dreams are made of. Kevin was 4th in line. Fu Dorje was 5th, directly behind him. Craig Hollister, the lead guide, was at the front. The other Western guide, an American named Daniela Ruiz, was in the middle of the group. The pace was set at 200 meters of elevation gain per hour, slow, steady, sustainable. For the first 3 hours, everything was routine. The group moved up the ridge without incident. Radio check-ins with Stuart Finch at base camp were normal. Kevin's oxygen consumption was within expected parameters. His pace didn't falter. He climbed exactly as he had during acclimatization, mechanically, efficiently, silently. At 12:30 a.m. on May 17th, the group reached the balcony at 400 meters. This is a small, relatively flat area on the southeast ridge. Standard rest point. Climbers swap oxygen bottles, eat, drink, assess whether to continue. Several Everest deaths have occurred at the balcony. Climbers who arrived there already depleted and never left. Craig Hollister called a 15-minute rest. Climbers collapsed onto their packs. Sherpas swapped oxygen cylinders. Daniela Ruiz moved through the group, checking on each client. She would later testify that Kevin appeared physically capable, but emotionally absent. She asked if he was okay. He nodded. During the rest, Kevin did something that Fu Dorje found unusual. He took out his camera. He'd been filming intermittently all night, short clips, a few seconds each. But at the balcony, he turned the camera on and held it. The footage, reviewed by investigators and partially described in court documents, shows Kevin pointing the camera at the night sky, stars above. The ridge below, dotted with headlamps from other expeditions. Kevin's breathing is audible, labored, but controlled. His oxygen mask is around his chin, not over his mouth. He's breathing ambient air at 400 meters. Then Kevin speaks. His voice is calm, almost gentle. This is it. This is the highest I've ever been. Highest I'll ever be. Pause. 8 seconds. Hi, Lily. Daddy's on Everest. You probably won't see this for a long time, maybe never. But I want you to know that I'm not scared. I'm not sad. I'm okay. I'm finally okay. Pause. 5 seconds. Tell Mom I love her. Tell Grandma I'm sorry. The footage continues for another 40 seconds. Kevin doesn't speak again. He films the stars. Then the camera drops to his lap. The lens captures his gloved hands in his lap, motionless. Fu Dorje didn't hear the recording. The wind and the noise of other climbers masked Kevin's voice. He would only learn about it months later, when the investigation summary was shared with him. At 12:45 a.m., Craig Hollister announced the group would continue toward the south summit. Climbers stood. They reorganized their gear. Oxygen regulators were checked. Crampon straps tightened. Kevin stood with the group. He took 2 steps up the ridge. Then he stopped. He turned around. He looked downhill, toward Camp 4, toward base camp, toward the world below. He stood there for approximately 10 seconds. Fu Dorje, directly behind him, waited. Kevin, we're moving. Kevin turned back around. He took another step. Then he sat down. Not a collapse, not a fall. A deliberate, controlled sitting down. He lowered himself onto the snow, crossed his legs, and placed his hands on his knees. Like meditation. Like he'd planned this exact position. Fu Dorje reached him in 3 seconds. Kevin, stand up, we need to keep moving. Kevin looked up at Fu Dorje. The headlamp caught his face. Fudorje said Kevin was smiling. Not a grimace. Not a pain response. A real smile. The first genuine smile Fudorje had seen on Kevin's face in 32 days. I'm done, Fudorje. Kevin, we're only 200 meters from the south summit. You're almost there. Stand up. I'm not going to the summit. Fudorje knelt beside him. He grabbed Kevin's arm. Kevin didn't resist but didn't help. Then we descend. Right now. We go back to Camp 4, we go down. No, Kevin, you will die here. Do you understand? At this altitude, if you stop, you die. Kevin's response, confirmed by Fudorje's formal statement, the investigation summary, and the audio captured by Kevin's chest camera, was 4 words. I know. It's okay. Fudorje radioed Craig Hollister. The call was brief. Client 6 is down, not injured, refusing to move. I need help. Hollister sent Daniela Ruiz back down the ridge. She reached Kevin and Fudorje in 8 minutes. By then, Kevin had removed his oxygen mask completely. He was breathing ambient air at 400 meters. His oxygen saturation was already dropping. Daniela later testified, I knelt in front of him. I told him we needed to move. He said he didn't want to. I told him he'd die. He said I know. I asked him to think about his daughter. His face didn't change. He said she'll be better off. I didn't know what to do. I've guided for 9 years. I've dealt with altitude psychosis, panic attacks, physical collapse. I have never had a client refuse to live. Fudorje and Daniela attempted physical evacuation. They each took an arm and tried to lift Kevin. He was 170 pounds plus gear. At 400 meters, the two of them could barely lift their own arms. They couldn't move him, not because Kevin resisted. He was limp, passive, compliant in his refusal. But at that altitude, with that oxygen deprivation, 2 people cannot carry a third who will not use his own legs. Craig Hollister made the call from higher on the ridge. The other 10 clients were still ascending. He could not abandon them. He ordered Daniela to return to the group. He told Fudorje to stay with Kevin and attempt to get him moving. This decision, sending Daniela back up and leaving Fudorje alone with Kevin, would be debated for years. Hollister argued he had a duty to the 10 other clients who were in the death zone and needed guide support. Critics argued that a client in active crisis should have triggered a full expedition halt. Both arguments have merit. Neither changes what happened. Fudorje stayed with Kevin. For the next 40 minutes, he tried everything. He talked to Kevin about his daughter. He talked about the descent. He described the sunrise they'd see if they just went down to Camp 4. He physically shook Kevin's shoulders. He yelled. Kevin's responses became shorter and quieter. His body was shutting down. Without supplemental oxygen at 400 meters, cognitive function deteriorates rapidly. Within 30 minutes, hypothermia and hypoxia begin a cascade that is essentially irreversible without immediate descent and medical intervention. At 1:15 a.m., Kevin removed his gloves. He placed them beside him in the snow. Neatly. Deliberately. Paradoxical undressing, a well-documented symptom of severe hypothermia, where the dying body, confused by thermoregulatory failure, perceives extreme cold as warmth. But Fudorje wasn't sure it was paradoxical undressing. Kevin's movements were too controlled, too intentional. He didn't rip his gloves off in confusion. He pulled each finger free, one at a time, and set the gloves down like he was placing them on a shelf. Then Kevin unzipped his downsuit to the waist. Kevin! Kevin! No! Put your gloves on. Zip up. Kevin! Kevin looked at Fudorje. His eyes were glassy. His speech was slurred. But his words were coherent. Fudorje, thank you for trying. You're a good man. Go back down. Take care of yourself. I'm not leaving you. You should. There's nothing here for you. Kevin's camera was still recording. The footage from this point, described in the investigation report, but never publicly released, shows Kevin's bare hands resting on his knees. His breathing is audible. Slow. Getting slower. The ambient sound is wind and Fudorje's voice, alternating between Nepali prayer and English pleas. At approximately 1:32 a.m., Kevin spoke his last recorded words. His voice was barely above a whisper. The audio required enhancement to be clearly understood. Finally at peace. Fu Dorje heard it. He told investigators those words broke something inside him that 11 Everest summits hadn't touched. Kevin's breathing continued for approximately 15 more minutes. It became irregular. Long pauses. Shallow gasps. The pattern of a body losing its fight against the cold and the altitude. At approximately 1:47 a.m. on May 17, 2019, Kevin Andrew Marsh stopped breathing. Fu Dorje stayed with him for another 20 minutes. He arranged Kevin's body. He zipped up Kevin's suit. He placed Kevin's gloves back on his hands. He said a prayer. Then he stood, turned on his headlamp, and began descending toward Camp 4. He descended alone, at 400 meters in the dark without a client to guide. Every step was a fight against his own body. His oxygen was running low. His hands were numb from removing his own gloves to try to warm Kevin's. He reached Camp 4 at 3:10 a.m. He crawled into a tent. He radioed Stuart Finch at base camp. "Kevin is dead." 2 words. Then Fu Dorje turned off the radio and didn't speak for 6 hours. Above him, 10 clients and Craig Hollister and Daniela Ruiz continued toward the summit. 9 of them reached it. They stood on top of Everest as the sun rose. They took photos. They celebrated. 400 meters below them, Kevin Marsh sat in the snow, facing the valley, his camera finally dead, his body beginning its permanent transformation into another landmark on the mountain that collects the broken and keeps them forever. Chapter 5. Recovery and Reckoning. Stuart Finch's first call was to Summit Horizon's Kathmandu office, 3:20 a.m., 10 minutes after Fu Dorje's radio transmission. The call lasted 6 minutes. Finch reported a client fatality. He provided the location, Southeast Ridge, approximately 400 meters near the balcony. He confirmed the client's name, Kevin Andrew Marsh. He confirmed the cause was exposure and voluntary cessation of movement. He used those exact words. Voluntary cessation of movement. Not suicide. Not refusal to descend. Voluntary cessation of movement. The Kathmandu office woke up the company's founder, Rajesh Thapa. Thapa made 2 calls. The first was to the American Embassy in Kathmandu. The second was to Summit Horizon's lawyer. He called the lawyer before he called Kevin's emergency contact. That sequence, lawyer before family, would later become a central point in the Marsh family's lawsuit. Why was legal protection the company's first instinct? What did Rajesh Thapa already know that made him reach for a lawyer at 3:30 in the morning? The answer would take 18 months to emerge, and when it did, it would reveal a pattern that extended far beyond Kevin Marsh. Sandra Marsh received the call at 4:47 p.m. Pacific Time on May 16, 2019. She was at home in Walnut Creek. The call came from the American Embassy. A consular officer named David Chen delivered the notification. Sandra later told investigators she knew before Chen finished his first sentence. She said she'd been expecting the call since Kevin walked through the airport doors. "I knew when he left," Sandra said. "I knew, and I didn't stop him. I told myself I was respecting his autonomy, his choices, his journey. I used all the words therapists use. Autonomy, boundaries, respecting his process. But the truth is I was scared. Scared that if I forced the issue, he'd cut me off. And I'd rather have a son who called once a week from the other side of the world than no son at all. And now I have no son at all." Hannah Marsh was notified separately by Kevin's attorney per the divorce agreement's emergency contact protocol. Hannah's response has never been made public. Her lawyer issued a statement requesting privacy. Lily was not told immediately. Hannah waited 3 days. She told Lily that Daddy had an accident on the mountain and that he was in heaven now. Lily's response, as later shared by Sandra in a grief support interview, "Can we go get him?" The body recovery question was straightforward and brutal. Kevin's body was at 400 meters on the Southeast Ridge. Recovery from that altitude is possible but extremely dangerous and expensive. Commercial helicopter operations above Camp 2 are limited by altitude. A ground team recovery would require multiple high-altitude Sherpas willing to climb into the death zone specifically to retrieve a body. Not a summit attempt, not a rescue. A recovery. The cost estimate, between $70,000 and $100,000. Sandra didn't have that money. Kevin's savings were gone, spent on the expedition. His life insurance policy had a suicide exclusion clause, and the circumstances of his death were ambiguous enough to trigger a review. The insurance company would eventually pay out, but not for 14 months. And by then, the recovery window had long closed. Kevin's body remained on Everest. It remains there today, sitting at 400 meters, visible to climbers who pass the balcony on their summit attempts. Some don't notice. Some do. Those who know the story look away. One climber, a German mountaineer named Lucas Weber, who summited Everest in May 2022, posted on a climbing forum about passing Kevin's body. You see many bodies on Everest. Most are old, faded, part of the landscape. This one was different. He was sitting upright, like he was watching something, like he was waiting. I couldn't look at him for more than a second. But I couldn't stop thinking about him for the rest of the descent. Phu Dorje descended from Camp Floor to base camp on May 18th. The descent took 11 hours. He was dehydrated, frostbitten on 3 fingers of his left hand, and suffering from snow blindness in his right eye. He was treated by the expedition's base camp physician. He refused psychological support. Over the next 72 hours, Phu Dorje gave 3 statements. The first was to Stuart Finch on May 18th. The second was to a liaison officer from the Nepal Ministry of Tourism on May 19th. The third was to an investigator hired by Summit Horizon's insurance company on May 20th. Each statement was consistent. Phu Dorje did not change his account. He did not soften it. He did not protect the company. He described exactly what he observed over 32 days. The crying, the not eating, the comments about his daughter, the refusal to move, the deliberate removal of gear, the final words. And in each statement, Phu Dorje made the same point. I reported my concerns to Stuart Finch on May 8th. I was told to keep watching. Nothing was done. Craig Hollister and Daniela Ruiz submitted their own statements on May 19th. Their accounts aligned with Phu Dorje's on the events at the balcony, but diverged on a critical question: whether the expedition should have been halted. Hollister maintained that his duty was to the majority of clients. 10 climbers were in the death zone. Halting the expedition would have stranded all of them at 400 meters or above, creating additional risk. He argued that Phu Dorje, the most experienced Sherpa on the team, was the right person to stay with Kevin, and that sending Daniela back up was the correct call. Daniela disagreed. In her statement, she said, "I believe the expedition should have been called off the moment Kevin sat down and refused to move. All clients should have been ordered to descend. The summit was not more important than a man's life." Craig made a judgment call. I believe it was the wrong one. This disagreement, Hollister versus Ruiz, became public in 2020 when court documents were filed. The climbing community split. Some sided with Hollister's logic. Others sided with Ruiz's ethics. Neither camp had a clean argument. The Nepalese government's investigation was completed in August 2019. The official report was 14 pages long. It classified Kevin's death as exposure resulting from voluntary cessation of climbing activity. It did not use the word suicide. It did not assign blame to Summit Horizon, to Craig Hollister, to Stuart Finch, or to anyone else. It recommended that commercial expedition operators consider implementing mental health screening protocols for clients. It was a recommendation, not a requirement. Nothing was mandated. Nothing was enforced. The report was filed and archived. Kevin's camera was recovered by a Sherpa team during a cleanup expedition in October 2019. The camera was delivered to Summit Horizon's Kathmandu office. The company's lawyer reviewed the footage before releasing it to the family. This sequence, company lawyer before family, matched the notification sequence. Legal protection first, grieving family second. Sandra Marsh's lawyer filed a formal complaint about this with the American Embassy. The complaint stated that Summit Horizon had no legal right to review or retain Kevin's personal property, including camera footage, before releasing it to his next of kin. Summit Horizon argued the camera contained footage relevant to their internal safety review. The camera was released to Sandra in December 2019, 7 months after Kevin's death. Sandra watched portions of the footage with Kevin's former therapist, Dr. Osman, present. She could not watch the final 17 minutes. Dr. Osman watched the entire recording. In a professional capacity, Dr. Osman wrote an assessment, requested by Sandra's lawyer for use in the lawsuit, stating that Kevin's behavior on the footage was consistent with a premeditated decision to end his life, not with acute altitude psychosis or sudden mental health crisis. In plain language, Kevin didn't snap at 400 meters. He planned this before he left California. That assessment, combined with Fu Dorje's consistent testimony, Stuart Finch's failure to document or escalate concerns, and the company's notification and camera handling sequences, formed the backbone of the Marsh family's lawsuit. Filed in January 2020, Sandra Marsh versus Summit Horizon Expeditions, limited wrongful death, negligence, failure to implement reasonable safety protocols, failure to respond to documented warning signs. The lawsuit asked for $3.2 million in damages. Summit Horizon's defense was straightforward. Kevin was a competent adult who passed all physical screenings, who was assessed by base camp management, who gave no explicit indication of suicidal intent, and who made a voluntary decision at altitude that no guide or Sherpa could have physically prevented. Their lawyers argued that imposing a duty to psychologically screen clients would be an unprecedented expansion of liability that would fundamentally alter the commercial expedition industry. They were right. It would fundamentally alter the industry. That was the point. The lawsuit would take 2 years. Its outcome would reveal things about Summit Horizon that the company never wanted public. Things about other clients, other expeditions, other warnings ignored. And at the center of it all, a question that nobody wanted to answer honestly. Did Summit Horizon know they were sending a suicidal man up Everest? If this story matters to you, if you think the people who profit from putting climbers on mountains should be held accountable for the ones who don't come back, then subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Every subscriber helps us investigate these stories deeper and hold these companies' feet to the fire. Hit that button. It takes 1 second. It matters. Chapter 6. What Summit Horizon knew. The lawsuit discovery process began in March 2020. Sandra Marsh's legal team, led by San Francisco attorney Jennifer Yee, filed requests for Summit Horizon's internal communications, client files, safety protocols, and incident reports for the previous 5 years. Summit Horizon fought every request. They filed motions to limit scope. They claimed proprietary business information. They argued that Nepalese business law, not American tort law, should govern. The jurisdictional battle alone took 4 months. Because Kevin was an American citizen, because he contracted with Summit Horizon's U.S.-facing booking partner, and because Sandra filed in California, the court ultimately ruled that American discovery standards applied to communications involving U.S. clients. Summit Horizon was ordered to produce documents in July 2020. What Jennifer Yee's team found in those documents changed the case entirely. The first revelation. Kevin Marsh was not the first client whose mental health had been flagged by a Sherpa. In the previous 4 years, Summit Horizon had received psychological concern reports about 5 other clients across 3 different expeditions. In every case, the process was identical. Sherpa reports concern verbally. Base camp manager has a conversation with the client. Client says they're fine. Climb continues. No documentation. No escalation. No formal protocol. Of those 5 previous clients, 1 died on descent from Camp 4 in 2017. The official cause was exhaustion and exposure. His Sherpa had reported the client was detached and unresponsive to instructions during the summit push. The concern was noted verbally. No action was taken. Jennifer Yee's team obtained this information through cross-referencing Sherpa employment records with incident reports. Summit Horizon had not voluntarily disclosed it. When confronted, the company's lawyers argued the cases were unrelated and involved different factual circumstances. The second revelation, Stuart Finch's email. During her initial investigation, Jennifer Yee had asked Summit Horizon whether Stuart Finch communicated Fu Dorje's May 8 concerns to Kathmandu headquarters. Summit Horizon initially stated they had no record of such communication. Then Yee subpoenaed Finch's personal email account. On May 8, 2019, the same day Fu Dorje reported his concerns, Stuart Finch sent an email to Rajesh Thapa's personal Gmail address, not the company address. Thapa's personal account. The email read, Rajesh, one of our Sherpas flagged emotional instability in a client. Client K. Marsh. Sherpa says client not eating, crying at night, making concerning comments. I've spoken to client, he says he's fine. Physically, his numbers are good. My assessment is he's dealing with personal issues but is capable of continuing. Wanted you aware in case anything comes up later. Let me know if you want me to pull him. Rajesh Thapa's response sent 22 minutes later. Thanks, Stuart. If his physicals are good, keep him on schedule. We can't pull clients for being emotional. Half our clients cry at base camp. Just keep an eye and document if anything changes. R.T. Two things about this exchange. First, Stuart Finch lied during his initial deposition when he said he couldn't recall whether he'd communicated with Kathmandu about Fudorje's concerns. He'd sent an email the same day to his boss's personal account. Second, Rajesh Thapa's response, we can't pull clients for being emotional, established that company leadership was aware of the concern and made a deliberate decision not to intervene. This wasn't an oversight, it wasn't a communication failure, it was a business decision. When confronted with the email during a supplemental deposition, Stuart Finch adjusted his testimony. He acknowledged sending the email. He said he used Thapa's personal account because the satellite internet at base camp was unreliable and personal Gmail loaded faster than the company's corporate server. Jennifer Yee asked him, Mr. Finch, if you used a personal email because it was faster and more reliable, doesn't that suggest this communication was important enough to require a reliable channel? Finch's lawyer objected. The question was sustained, but the point was made. The third revelation was the most damaging, and it involved the camera footage. Summit Horizon's lawyer, as previously mentioned, reviewed Kevin's camera footage before releasing it to the family. What Jennifer Yee discovered was that the footage released to Sandra was not the complete footage. The camera's memory card contained 4 hours and 17 minutes of recorded material. The footage given to Sandra contained 3 hours and 51 minutes. 26 minutes were missing. Summit Horizon claimed the missing footage was corrupted data, damaged by cold and moisture. They provided a technical report from a Kathmandu electronics shop supporting this claim. Jennifer Yee hired an independent digital forensics firm in San Francisco. Their analysis of the memory card, which Sandra's team obtained through a separate court order, concluded that the missing 26 minutes were not corrupted. They were deleted. The deletion occurred on a computer running Windows 10 with a Kathmandu-based IP address. The deletion timestamp was November 14, 2019, 1 month before the camera was released to Sandra. Someone at Summit Horizon deliberately deleted 26 minutes of Kevin's camera footage. What was in those 26 minutes has never been fully established. The forensic team recovered fragments, approximately 9 minutes of partial video and audio. The recovered fragments included 3 segments. Segment 1, Kevin at base camp on approximately May 9th, based on ambient conditions. Kevin is speaking directly to the camera. His words, partially recovered. Talked to me today. Asked if I was okay. Told him what he corrupted. They just need you to say the right words and they leave you alone. Nobody actually. This corresponded to Kevin's journal entry about Stuart Finch's welfare check. The footage confirmed Kevin's perception that the check was performative. Segment 2. Kevin at what appears to be Camp 2, based on altitude markers visible in frame. Kevin is speaking to someone off camera, possibly Fudorje, possibly another client. His words, partially recovered, don't worry about me. I know what I'm doing. I've known since corrupted California before I even bought the ticket. This segment, if authenticated fully, would establish that Kevin's intention to die on Everest predated his arrival in Nepal. It directly contradicted Summit Horizon's defense that Kevin's crisis was acute and unforeseeable. Segment 3. Audio only. No video recovered. Voices of 2 people. One identified as Stuart Finch, the other unidentified, but speaking with a Nepali accent, possibly a Sherpa or staff member. Partial audio. Can't afford to lose another client this season. Kathmandu is already corrupted. Just make sure the physicals are logged. If it goes sideways, the paperwork needs to show we did our job. This fragment suggested that Summit Horizon was more concerned with liability documentation than with actual client safety. If the full conversation could have been recovered, it might have shown that Finch was explicitly instructed to create a paper trail that protected the company rather than protect the client. Summit Horizon denied deleting any footage. They attributed the discrepancy to quote, technical errors in file transfer. Their Kathmandu electronics shop stood by the original corruption assessment. The independent forensics team stood by their deletion finding. The court accepted both reports into evidence and allowed the jury to determine credibility. Let me be clear about something. This channel exists to tell these stories completely. The uncomfortable parts. The parts that companies pay lawyers to keep hidden. If you think this kind of investigation matters, if you think families like the Marshes deserve the full truth, then subscribe. Share this video. Drop a comment telling us what you think happened to those 26 minutes. Your engagement helps us keep doing this work. It's that simple. The trial, Sandra Marsh versus Summit Horizon Expeditions, reached settlement in November 2021. The terms were confidential, sealed by mutual agreement. Neither side disclosed the amount. Neither side was permitted to characterize the outcome as a victory or an admission of fault. But three things happened after the settlement that spoke louder than any press release. First, Summit Horizon Expeditions ceased operations in January 2022. Rajesh Thapa released a statement citing market conditions and the impact of COVID-19 on adventure tourism. He did not mention the lawsuit. He did not mention Kevin Marsh. Second, Stuart Finch has not worked in adventure tourism since 2021. His LinkedIn profile lists him as a logistics consultant based in Leeds. He has not commented publicly on the case. Third, Foodorje filed his own complaint with Nepal's Department of Tourism in February 2022. The complaint alleged that Summit Horizon had retaliated against him by providing negative references to other expedition companies after he cooperated with the Marsh family's lawyers. Foodorje's complaint was acknowledged but never formally adjudicated. By then, Summit Horizon no longer existed as an entity to adjudicate against. Craig Hollister continued guiding. He joined a different expedition company and led an Everest expedition in 2022 and 2023. He has not spoken publicly about Kevin Marsh. When a climbing journalist contacted him for comment in 2022, Hollister responded with a single line. I made the best decision I could with the information I had. I stand by it. Daniela Ruiz left high-altitude guiding entirely. She now works as a wilderness therapy facilitator in Colorado, leading backcountry programs for at-risk youth. In a 2023 podcast interview, one of the few times she's discussed Kevin's death, she said, I've spent 4 years thinking about what I would have done differently. I should have refused to go back up. I should have stayed with Kevin and Foodorje. I didn't. I followed Craig's order, and I have to live with that. The podcast host asked Daniela if she thought Kevin's death was preventable. Her answer was immediate. 100%. Not at 400 meters. By then it was too late. It was preventable in California. It was preventable at the application stage. It was preventable on May 8th when Foodorje told Stuart. It was preventable at every single point before Kevin left Camp 4 for the summit. We had dozens of chances. We missed every single one. That word we is important. Daniela didn't say they. She didn't exempt herself. She included herself in the failure. 4 years later, she still carries it. And she's not the only one. Chapter 7. What remains in the 4 years since Kevin Marsh's death? Exactly one commercial Everest expedition operator has implemented mandatory psychological screening for clients. 1. Out of more than 40 licensed operators. The company is called Alpine Integrity Expeditions. It was founded in 2021 by a former Summit Horizon Sherpa. Not Foodorje. A Sherpa named Dawa Tashi who worked for Summit Horizon from 2015 to 2019 and who quit after Kevin's death. Alpine Integrity's screening process is simple. Every client completes a 30-question psychological assessment developed in partnership with a Nepali mental health organization. The assessment is reviewed by a licensed counselor. Clients flagged for concern receive a follow-up interview. Clients deemed at risk are offered a full refund and referral to mental health services. No exceptions. In its first 2 seasons, Alpine Integrity flagged 9 clients. 4 were cleared after follow-up interviews. 5 were offered refunds. 3 accepted, 2 did not, and were denied participation. One of the 2 denied clients sent an angry email calling the policy discriminatory and an insult to anyone who's ever been through a difficult time. The other sent a thank you note 6 months later. He wrote, "You probably saved my life. I wasn't in a place to make that decision for myself. Thank you for making it for me." One company out of 40. That's the legacy of Kevin Marsh's death, reduced to numbers. The rest of the industry pushed back. The Expedition Operators Association of Nepal, an industry group representing the majority of commercial operators, issued a statement in 2022 opposing mandatory psychological screening. Their argument: it would increase costs, create liability complications, and deter clients from booking. They suggested that existing physical screening protocols were sufficient to ensure client safety. Jennifer Yee, the Marsh family's attorney, responded publicly. Sufficient to ensure client safety? Kevin Marsh passed every physical screening. He was dead within 32 days. The physical screenings aren't insufficient. They're irrelevant to the actual danger. The Nepalese government has not updated its regulations. The 2019 recommendation, consider implementing mental health screening, remains a recommendation. No enforcement mechanism. No penalty for non-compliance. No follow-up. As of 2024, you can book a commercial Everest expedition, wire $65,000, fly to Nepal, and start climbing without anyone asking you a single question about your mental health. Your VO2 max matters. Your resting heart rate matters. Your bank balance matters. Whether you want to come home does not. Pu Dorje is 44 years old. He lives in Namche Bazaar with his wife and 2 children. He still works as a high-altitude porter and guide, but exclusively on Everest. He refuses assignments above Camp 3 on any other 8,000-meter peak. When asked why he continues to work on Everest specifically, he says, "Because Kevin is still there. Every season 1 go up, I pass where he's sitting. I say a prayer. I check that no other client is making the same face he made. If I stop going, who watches for the next Kevin?" Pu Dorje has reported mental health concerns about 2 additional clients since Kevin's death, both with different expedition companies. In both cases, his concerns were taken seriously. Both clients were evaluated, one was cleared, one descended voluntarily. When reporters have asked Pu Dorje whether he blames himself, his answer has been consistent. "I did what I could with what I was allowed to do. I was not allowed to pull him off the mountain. I was not allowed to refuse the assignment. I was not allowed to call his family. I was allowed to watch and report. I watched. I reported. And he died." Whoopee. The system failed Pu Dorje as thoroughly as it failed Kevin. A man who saw the danger clearly was given no tools, no authority, and no support to act on what he saw. His reward for being right was frostbite, trauma, and professional retaliation. Sandra Marsh is 67 years old. She retired from teaching in 2020. She volunteers with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, where she speaks to groups about warning signs and the limitations of the people who see them. In a 2023 speaking engagement, Sandra said something that has stayed with everyone who heard it. "People ask me what I would have done differently. The answer is everything. I would have driven to the airport and physically blocked him. I would have called the expedition company and lied, told them he had a heart condition. I would have stolen his passport. I would have done anything. But at the time, I did what loving, respectful, boundary-observing people do. I respected his autonomy. I trusted the process. I believed the system would catch what I couldn't. And the system didn't catch anything. It cashed his check and sent him up the mountain." Sandra has never visited Nepal. She has never seen Everest. She says she never will. "My son is on that mountain. But my son was gone before he ever got on the plane. Visiting the place where his body sits doesn't change that. It doesn't bring him closer. It just makes the geography real. And I don't need the geography to be real. It's real enough in my head. Every single night." Lily Marsh is 11 years old. She lives with Hannah in Palo Alto. She is in 6th grade. She plays soccer and reads graphic novels. She does not talk about her father publicly, and her mother has ensured that no media outlet has accessed her or photographed her since Kevin's death. Sandra sees Lily every other weekend. The same custody schedule Kevin had. Sandra says Lily asks about Kevin sometimes. Not often. When she does, it's usually factual. How tall was he? What was his favorite food? Did he like soccer? Sandra answers every question. She keeps photo albums. She has videos of Kevin from before the divorce, birthday parties, holidays, a clip of Kevin pushing Lily on a swing while singing off-key. Sandra has never shown Lily the Everest footage. She may never. Lily doesn't need to see her father die, Sandra says. She needs to remember him alive, laughing, singing badly, pushing her on a swing. That's her father, not the man on the mountain. That man was someone else. The purple crayon drawing, the stick figure on a mountain with, "Come home, Daddy," was not found in Kevin's pocket. That was an early media report that was never corrected. The drawing was found in Kevin's tent at base camp. It was in an envelope, addressed to Sandra, along with a handwritten note. The contents of that note have never been made public. Sandra has confirmed its existence but has declined to share it. "It's between me and my son," she said. "The world got everything else. They don't get this." That's her right. And we will respect it. There is a plaque in Walnut Creek, California, in a small park near the elementary school where Sandra taught for 31 years. The plaque was installed in 2021, funded by a group of Sandra's former students and colleagues. It reads, "In memory of Kevin Andrew Marsh, 1984 to 2019. Beloved son, devoted father, kind soul. If you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988. You are not alone." The plaque doesn't mention Everest. It doesn't mention climbing. It doesn't mention Hannah's 9 words, or Summit Horizon, or Feu d'Orge, or any of the decisions that put Kevin on that mountain. It mentions what Kevin was before all of that. A son, a father, a person worthy of being remembered for who he was, not for how he died. If this video changed how you think about climbing, about mental health, about the systems that fail, people like Kevin, subscribe to this channel. We are covering the full story of the 2014 Everest avalanche next, and the investigation into what that disaster revealed about how expedition companies value Sherpa lives versus client lives. It's a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the industry. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And share this video. Kevin's story deserves to be heard by everyone who thinks Everest deaths are just about weather and altitude. They're not. They never have been. Here's the thing about Kevin Marsh that stays with me. He didn't fail. Not in the way Hannah meant when she said those 9 words. He raised a daughter who is, by all accounts, a kind and resilient kid. He built a career. He maintained a relationship with his mother through the worst period of his life. He was described by every person who knew him, every single one, as gentle, intelligent, and deeply caring. Kevin Marsh accomplished meaningful things, many of them. He just couldn't see them anymore. Hannah's words didn't create his pain. They gave his existing pain a voice. A narrative. A sentence he could replay until it became the only truth he believed. And Everest? Everest was never going to fix that. No summit fixes a broken sense of self. No altitude replaces what a person believes they've lost. Kevin climbed 400 meters to prove he mattered. But mattering was never the problem. Kevin mattered to Sandra. He mattered to Lily. He mattered to Feu d'Orge, a man who'd known him for 32 days and risked frostbite trying to save his life. Kevin mattered. He just couldn't feel it. The mountain didn't prove Kevin wrong. It didn't prove his ex wrong. It didn't prove anything. It took a man who was already dying inside and gave him a place where the outside could match. That's not a lesson. That's not a moral. It's just the coldest, most literal truth about what happened. If you're watching this and something in Kevin's story feels familiar, if you recognize the withdrawing, the flattening, the making plans that don't include a future, please talk to someone. Call 988. Text HOME to 741-741. Walk into an emergency room and say you need help. You don't have to climb a mountain to prove you matter. You already do. And the people who love you? They already know it. Even if you can't hear them right now, Kevin Marsh is still on Everest. Sitting at 400 meters, facing the valley, watching a sunrise he'll never see. The mountain keeps him the way it keeps all its dead. Frozen, silent, permanent. But Kevin isn't the mountains. He belongs to Lily, who asks about him on quiet afternoons. He belongs to Sandra, who keeps his note in a drawer she opens when the house feels too empty. He belongs to Fudorje, who says a prayer every time he passes the balcony. Kevin belongs to the people who loved him. Not to the snow, not to the stone, not to the 9 words that sent him there. He just couldn't feel it. And that is the real tragedy of Everest. Not the cold, not the altitude, not the storms. The real tragedy is that people climb it looking for something they already had. And some of them never come back down to find out.